Today, I, Elizabeth Garcia, am going to tell you 8 things that were completely draining my energy. And the moment I stopped doing each of them, something remarkable started happening in my life. I began to energetically protect myself, and prosperity simply started to flow. It was as if everything suddenly unlocked. Opportunities started appearing, paths became clearer, and life felt much lighter, much more enjoyable to live. And maybe you don't even realize it, but many of these things might also be happening in your life without you noticing. For a long time, I believed I was doing everything right. I worked, took care of my home, tried to maintain positive thoughts, and truly believed I was on the right path. But even so, I constantly felt exhausted, as if something was pulling my energy downward. Sometimes things would start going well, but soon some kind of obstacle would appear, a delay, or an unexpected situation that seemed to block everything again. That's when I began paying closer attention to some simple habits in my daily life. And it was exactly there that I realized that small actions were influencing my energy far more than I had ever imagined. The first one was a habit that seems completely harmless, but actually has a huge energetic impact. I used to have the habit of posting photos or videos of my food before eating it. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. I would grab my phone, take a picture, record a video, and post it before taking the first bite. It seemed normal. After all, nowadays, a lot of people do this. But one day, I started reflecting on something very important. Energy has no distance. Not everyone who watches your videos or sees the photos you post truly feels happy for you. Some people may feel envy, others may feel frustration, others may simply be going through difficult moments in their lives. And all of this generates energy. When you expose your food before consuming it, that energy can directly influence what you are about to ingest, because food also absorbs vibrations. This might sound strange to some people, but when I began paying attention to it, everything started making sense. Food is a source of energy for the body, and everything surrounding it also influences that energy. So I completely changed this habit. Today, I do it differently. First, I eat my breakfast, then I post. First, I have lunch, then I share. First, I eat dinner, then I publish. It seems like a small change, but the difference it makes is enormous. Because when you eat first, the food has already entered your own energy before any external vibration can interfere. After I started doing this, I noticed something interesting. I began eating with much more presence. Before, many times I was more concerned about taking the perfect picture than actually enjoying the moment. When I removed the phone from in front of my food, I started paying attention to the flavor, the texture, and the moment of gratitude for being able to nourish myself. And that alone already changed a lot within me. This change also reminded me of something that happened to me years ago. I used to have lunch frequently at a certain restaurant, and every time I ate there, I would feel very sick afterward. At first, I thought it might be some kind of stomach issue, so I even went through medical tests to understand what was happening. But the tests showed nothing wrong. The strange part was that when I ate at home, at my mother's house, or anywhere else, I felt perfectly fine. That's when I started observing the situation more closely. One day, while I was waiting for my food to arrive, I heard a very intense argument coming from the kitchen. Employees arguing, shouting, exchanging harsh words while preparing the dishes. It caught my attention, but at the time, I didn't connect one thing to the other. The problem was that this happened frequently. There was always tension, arguments, or irritation in that environment. Over time, I realized something very clear. Every time I ate at that restaurant, I felt sick. Every single time. It wasn't a coincidence. After talking to some other people who also used to eat there, I discovered that others had similar experiences. Some said they left the place with stomach pain, others felt unwell, and some simply said they didn't feel good after eating there. That's when everything started to make sense. In the kitchen of that restaurant, there were constant conflicts among the staff. They argued while preparing the food, shouted at each other, and exchanged heavy words while cooking. In other words, all that energy of anger, irritation, and negativity was being absorbed by the food. And the people eating there were also absorbing that energy. It might sound hard to believe if you've never thought about energy before. But when you start paying attention, you realize that this happens all the time. Places filled with tension tend to create heavy environments, and heavy environments directly influence how people feel. It didn't take long for that restaurant to start losing customers. People simply stopped going there, and shortly after, it eventually closed its doors. When I found out about that, I immediately stopped eating there. That was a very clear proof to me that energy truly influences everything, including what we consume. That's why today I always say, don't post photos of your food before eating. Eat first, then share. Try this experiment for a few days and notice how you begin to feel lighter. Sometimes very small changes can create transformations much bigger than we imagine. The second thing I stopped doing was keeping the famous welcome mat at the entrance of my home. It may seem like something friendly, warm, and polite, but when you begin to understand a little more about energy, you realize that the entrance door of a house is a true energetic portal. It is through that doorway that people, intentions, vibrations, and influences enter. When you place a mat that says welcome, energetically you are allowing any type of energy to enter. including those that are not positive. It is as if you are leaving the door open for everything to come in without any kind of filter. When I realized this, I made a simple but very powerful change. I removed the welcome mat and started placing elements that help filter and purify the energy entering my home. One of them is coarse salt. I keep a glass with coarse salt behind the entrance door and replace it every 30 days. Salt has been known for centuries as an element of energetic purification. Many cultures use salt for spiritual cleansing, protection, and balancing the environment. It helps absorb denser vibrations and keeps the space more energetically balanced. Another thing I began placing at the entrance of my home was natural plants. Lucky bamboo, for example, is wonderful for attracting prosperity and renewing the energy of a space. The snake plant is also excellent for energetic protection. These plants are widely used because they help create a kind of natural barrier against heavier energies. When someone enters the house, they first pass through this energetic filtering, and that completely changes the vibration of the environment. Little by little, I started noticing that the house felt lighter, calmer, and even visitors began commenting that the atmosphere felt more pleasant. But there is something even more important when we talk about the entrance of a house. The door is the very first point of contact between the outside world and your personal space. Everything you allow to enter there directly influences your environment, your rest, your mood, and even your energy throughout the day. And it was by observing these small details that I began to understand something very deep. Many times our energy is not being drained by big problems, but by small habits that we repeat every day without realizing it. Now let's move on to the third thing that changed my life significantly. I learned to do things first and talk about them later. For a long time, I had the habit of telling people absolutely everything I was planning to do. If I was thinking about starting a project, I would tell people. If I was considering traveling somewhere, I would share it. If I was planning to buy something important, I would talk about it too. It seemed completely normal. After all, sharing plans with others feels like something natural. But I started noticing a very curious pattern. Every time I talked about something before it happened, some kind of obstacle would appear. Sometimes there would be delays, sometimes unexpected problems would arise, or things simply stopped happening the way I had imagined. At first, I thought it was just coincidence, but after observing this repeatedly, I started reflecting more carefully about the situation. And that's when I realized something very important. When you talk about something before it happens, you open space for many different energies to enter that plan. Some people may genuinely feel happy for you, that's true, but others may feel envy, comparison, or even discouragement about their own lives. Even when these emotions are not conscious, they still generate vibration, and that vibration can end up interfering with the natural flow of things. So I decided to completely change this habit. Today I do it differently. First I accomplish it, then I talk about it. If I'm going on a trip, I only share it when I'm already at the destination or when I've already returned. If I'm working on a project, I keep it quiet until everything is finished. And the difference this made was impressive. Things began to flow much more easily. Projects started materializing with fewer obstacles, decisions began happening more smoothly, and I realized that keeping certain things in silence is also a way of protecting your own energy. There is a very old saying that expresses this idea perfectly: what nobody knows, nobody can ruin. And the truth is that people don't always do this intentionally. Most of the time, it's simply energy circulating unconsciously. But when you learn to preserve your plans, you create a kind of natural protection around them. Now let's move on to the fourth thing I stopped doing. I stopped exposing details of my personal life. Nowadays, many people feel the need to show absolutely everything on social media. Where they are, what they are doing, who they are with, what they bought, where they are going, how they live. It's almost as if life has turned into a permanent reality show. For a while, I lived like that too. I shared many details of my daily life, showed personal moments, recorded videos of routine situations, and posted almost everything. But over time, I started realizing that the more I exposed my life, the more energetically exhausted I felt. The truth is that we are not energetically protected all the time. There are days when we are more sensitive, more vulnerable, or emotionally more tired. And in those moments, energetic gaps can appear, openings through which criticism, judgment, and negative vibrations can enter. Not everyone who follows your life on social media is genuinely rooting for you. Some people watch simply out of curiosity. Others watch to compare their own lives with yours. And unfortunately, some watch with feelings of envy or frustration. When you expose too much of your personal life, you end up opening yourself to all those energies at once. That's when I started changing this behavior. Today, I share much less about my personal routine. Not everything needs to be on the internet. Not every moment needs to be recorded. There are moments that become much more precious when they are simply lived with presence, without the need to show them to others. And when I started preserving those moments, I noticed that my mind became calmer and my energy much more balanced. Now let's move on to the fifth thing I stopped doing, which also changed the way energy flows in my life. I stopped constantly exposing the people I love on social media. In the past, I used to post many photos with family members, close friends, and important people in my life. It seemed natural. After all, sharing happy moments with the people we love is something beautiful. But over time, I began noticing something that really caught my attention. Every time I posted photos with certain family members, some kind of problem would appear afterward. Sometimes disagreements would arise. Sometimes someone would get sick. Other times, an unexpected situation would happen. At first, I didn't connect one thing with the other. But after observing this happening several times, I started reflecting more deeply. I realized that sometimes we may be able to protect our own energy, but the people around us do not always have that same protection. When you expose someone on social media, that person also begins receiving the energy of everyone who is looking at that image. And not all of those energies are positive. Some people may look with envy, others may look with comparison, and some may project emotions that even they themselves are not fully aware of. So I made a simple but very important decision. I started protecting the people I love more. Today, I rarely expose intimate moments involving my family or the people closest to me. Not because I stopped living happy moments with them, but because I learned that some things are simply too precious to place in front of everyone. Now let's talk about the sixth thing I stopped doing. I stopped showing all the rooms of my house, especially my bedroom. In the past, I had the habit of showing decoration details, recording videos inside my home, and sharing complete views of different rooms. But later, I understood something very important. The bedroom is one of the most sacred places in a house. It is where we rest, where we sleep, where we recover our energy, reorganize our thoughts, and reconnect with ourselves. When you expose that environment to many people, it is almost like opening an extremely intimate part of your energy. The bedroom is practically the center of rest for the body and the mind. It needs protection. Today, I do not show my bedroom on social media, and I also avoid allowing many people to enter that space in my home. This brought a much stronger feeling of peace and energetic protection into my life. Now let's move on to the seventh thing I stopped doing. For a long time, I consumed a lot of negative content. Constant news, videos about tragedies, stories about scams, catastrophic predictions, and content that talked only about problems. Many people believe that consuming this type of content helps them stay protected. But in practice, the opposite often happens. Our subconscious mind records everything we see and hear. It doesn't clearly distinguish between what we are simply watching and what we are actually living. So when you spend a lot of time watching content about fear, violence, or tragedy, your brain begins to register those things as part of your reality. This creates anxiety, worry, and ends up lowering your energetic vibration. I realized this very clearly while talking with a friend of mine who is a lawyer. She constantly shared videos about financial scams and digital crimes. She said she did it to protect herself. But one day, during a conversation, I discovered something curious. Even knowing so much about scams, she had already fallen for 2 of them. In one of those cases, 5,000 reais were taken directly from her bank account. That situation reinforced something I had already been noticing. The more you feed your mind with a certain type of information, the more that reality becomes stronger inside your mind. So today, I choose much more carefully what I watch. I look for content that brings knowledge, inspiration, growth, and peace. And now we come to the 8th thing. Perhaps one of the most important of all. I began creating a small daily ritual of energetic protection. Every day I set aside a few minutes to silence my mind, breathe deeply, and clear out negative thoughts that may have appeared throughout the day. That moment of silence helps reorganize the mind and strengthen your energy. I also like to repeat phrases of gratitude and healing because this helps reprogram internal patterns that often block prosperity, health, and happiness. And whenever I leave the house for the first time in the day, I make a small mental declaration. I say to myself, I am protected. I am blessed. I am guided by God. Prosperity walks with me. It may sound simple, but words have power. Thoughts have power. The way you begin your day directly influences the energy that will follow you throughout it. Since I started making these small changes, my life has become much more balanced. When you protect your energy, your mind, and your spaces, you create a much more favorable environment for good things to happen. Prosperity, peace, health, and opportunities begin to flow much more naturally. I am Elizabeth Garcia, and from the bottom of my heart, I hope that at least one of these things can help you better protect your energy and transform your life. And always remember something very important. When you take care of your energy, you take care of your life.